Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Most jobs that kept the world's essential services going throughout the pandemic were actually people in hourly jobs in critical industries such as warehousing, healthcare, retail, you name it. So the question prevails that how can we help bring innovation to these sectors to help transform the lives of these employees who work in these industries while still driving business growth and retention? Sometimes there seems to be a dichotomy there. So that's what we're diving into today. And on the show today, we talk with Traci Chernoff, Director of Employee Engagement at Legion Technologies. Legion Technologies is an HR tech company whose stated mission is one that I love. It is to turn hourly jobs into good jobs. We're going to talk with Tracy to learn more about their mission and her role as well. Tracy is also the fantastic host of an amazing podcast called Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources, which you should 100% check out because it is awesome. All right. So that's not going to be my only plug for it. Join us today as we discuss how Legion is helping labor-intensive industries to optimize their operations for increased productivity and, most importantly, better work lives for their employees. Tracy, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me and for such a wonderful introduction. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes, this is bound to be a fantastic conversation. So before we get into it, let's cue the intro. All right, and we're back. So Tracy, tons of fun and tons of great stuff in the show, where we're talking about transforming hourly jobs to good jobs, how technology is changing the world of work. And, from our previous conversation, I know this is about to be lots of fun, really insightful for folks out there who may have this kind of workforce. But before we dive in, would love to give you an opportunity to tell us about yourself, who you are, where you're located, what you do, and then also, give a short description of what Legion does. So a lot there at you, but if you could just share a bit about yourself, Tracy.
Totally. Thank you so much. Like you said, my name is Traci Chernoff. I am the Director of Employee Engagement at Legion Technologies. I also am the host of my own podcast, Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources. I mean, You said it all. So that I say that again to reiterate that that's like literally who I am. I don't have much else going on. No, I'm just kidding. I am married. I actually got married in October, and my husband and I live in New York City, and we're making a big move to Cleveland actually in a year for his job. So we'll see how a regular old Jersey girl and New Yorker fare in Cleveland. We shall see.
I feel like that's the start of a really cool sitcom, like Jersey in Cleveland or something.
Totally. When we visited, I was like, I'm going to have to I'm going to have to like speak a little bit slower, a little softer, and not get so, like hung up on some of the details. But actually, everyone there is super nice. So shout out to Cleveland. It'll be our home in the future. Anyway, I have been in HR really for my entire career. And I'm so excited that we're talking about this topic because I grew up in my HR career in retail. So I've worked in some seriously critical leadership roles within the HR function in places like Target and SMCP, which is a luxury global fashion retailer. And my more recent role before joining Legion was Director of HR for North America. So I hope to bring a lot of my own personal experience and anecdotes to the conversation. And to answer your question about what it is that we do at Legion, I'll tell you, Legion Technologies, our mission is to transform and turn hourly jobs into good jobs. And there's no better mission to me than that. Our company's industry-leading AI-powered workforce management platform, also known as WFM, optimizes labor efficiency and enhances the employee experience simultaneously and at scale. And our platform has been proven to deliver 13 times on ROI through schedule optimization, reduced attrition, increased productivity and increased operational efficiency. So we're delivering cutting edge technology in an easy to use platform and mobile application that employees love. And I can tell you from experience, because actually at SMCP, we use Legion. So I'm going to be talking a lot about that today.
Yeah. In fact, I think that's really, really fascinating that you were a client and then you were obviously convinced or, inspired, let's call it that, to come on board. And we'll get into that. But, a couple of fun questions, like I like to ask folks. Let's see. Let's go with this one. Would you consider yourself introvert, extrovert? That's always fun to get to kind of know people that we deal with.
Yeah, totally. No, I would say I'm like 1,000% extroverted. But what's so interesting, you could probably tell already, even from our first interaction. But I have to say, like during the pandemic, I became a little introverted, which is a little strange. Like I find myself sometimes saying, I don't really want to go out. I kind of just want to hang out at home and relax. Maybe it's since getting married that my life has changed a little bit, and I just love spending time with my husband. I don't know if he listens to this. This is major bonus points for him.
I know. Yes.
Totally. He's like, I'm totally fun to be around. Yes. But yeah, I would say I'm mostly extroverted.
Very, very cool. No, I think myself too, if this podcast isn't any indication of that, primarily more extroverted, but also, more newly hitched here. So actually September. So we're right a month apart. Yes.
There you go.
But I did notice that I was a bit more of a homebody afterwards.
Right?
Odd,
So strange.
It does things to
Thank goodness for our podcast, bringing us out of the woodwork.
That's probably it. This is my what do you call it? My expression, and therefore I don't have to bring it at home. Totally. What was your first job? Either your first job as maybe a teenager or, your first one out of college. Curious to kind of hear folks' humble beginnings here on how they're started, or maybe not so humble, who knows?
Totally humble beginnings. First to say that. When I was about 11, 10, maybe 11 years old, I actually started working as a babysitter. My older sister has special needs, so I had this really unique experience of being able to be trusted to care for other children and individuals with special needs. So that was something that I really enjoyed doing as a babysitter. And I watched other, kids as well who maybe didn't have special needs. But in terms of my first W-2 job, I worked at Aeropostale when I was 16. I've always right? Back when there were monkeys on the shirts.
Yes. The height of teen boy, teen girl fashion.
Totally. Yes. And I always, the moment I could get my working papers, I was in my guidance counselor's office. I was like, I'm ready to be independent and make my own money because I want to do whatever I can to support, what's going on here. And so I started working at Aeropostale, and I remember just being that hourly employee, and I was making $7.25 because that was the norm and the minimum wage at the time, and I was just so proud of it. I was so excited, and I worked there until until college really, and then I moved over to some other retail jobs. So
very, very cool. And I think because you have that very hands-on retail experience dealing with hourly jobs, I think you bring a really interesting perspective, kind of growing, not to say in the ranks, but viewing it from the other side here of, hey, I've worked in this role, so you can kind of empathize and kind of be more closer to your employee population. And so you're at Legion Technologies now. You shared a little bit about what they do, but I found it interesting that before Legion, you were a client over at Legion. So I'm very curious, and we'll be jumping around all over the place. So folks who watch this podcast, it tends to be a bit more structured, but there was just so much fun stuff here that we're just gonna be going all over the place. So anyway, I'm curious to learn about what you saw in Legion Technologies as a client that inspired you to decide to come on board.
It's a great question. I appreciate you asking it. First of all, I have to say it's a very unique experience having been on the outside looking in and now being on the inside looking out from Legion. And when I was at SMCP, which again is a global luxury fashion retailer, I was there and I was really trying to bring optimized workforce management to, our environment. And at the time, we really thought we were solving an operational challenge. And having come from Target as an in-store HR generalist, HR manager, I had a lot of scheduling experience and workforce management experience, which is why I was kind of tasked with finding that next step up in managing our workforce. So when I was doing the research, I found Legion and I was like, wow, they're actually doing things really differently. They're leveraging machine learning and AI-powered technology to not only like make the operational side of automated scheduling easier, but actually it's the goal is to improve employee experience, which I thought was such a wonderful mission to be on. And so I was in this unique experience of actually doing the research for the workforce management tool when I was at SMCP. And then I was the project manager. So I actually rolled out Legion. I was able to test the tools as a customer, as a client, and I got to see all of the things that it was capable of. And so we actually rolled out Legion in 2020, really at the height of the pandemic, and it helped us solve some serious challenges that we probably otherwise would not have really been easily able to solve for. And so then as I was at SMCP for almost 5 years, and I had a stint at another retailer for a little bit. And then I was like, you know what? I really love what we were doing with Legion, and maybe I should just join them. And so I actually reached out to Legion and I was like, I'm really excited about, what we're doing and what Legion is doing for, the hourly employee and for businesses combined. And so then they, we had a really great relationship. It's something that I'm so grateful for, but thankfully they were able to make some space for me on the team. And so I just, there's no better testament to an organization than being on the customer side and then realizing you want to also be on the internal side. And then, here I am being able to share the story of from customer to employee.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think it is a testament, right? It's not every, a vendor or, a vendor or a customer that you say, hey, I would really like to be a part of this, mission. So I think that speaks a lot. And let's dive more into your current role. It's around employee engagement. So in your leadership role there as director of employee engagement, what does that all encompass? Employee engagement tends to be a little, ambiguous, although everyone knows it's important and it could encompass a lot of things, small things, very specific, very broad. So help us understand what your role encompasses there, Tracy.
Yeah, it's a great point too. And actually, I think it's the ambiguity specifically that makes my role so fun. So I get this really awesome job and opportunity to focus on the employee engagement for our internal Legionaries or Legion employees. But I also, because of my customer experience, get to be a little bit more external facing also and talk about how our solutions drive employee engagement for the customers that are using Legion. And I can only speak to that from my own personal experience, having used Legion for the 2 years that we were using it before I moved over to Legion. And so, when I think about even the internal side of my job, we have grown so much over the last year, especially. We've experienced rapid growth, and with that rapid growth requires a lot of focus on how we are paying attention to the internal customer, as I would call it. So we have our external customers, those who are leveraging our solutions, but then we have the Legionaries who are making it all happen. And so I have the pleasure of being able to focus on that core group of people who are focusing on the solutions to provide this really wholesome mission of turning hourly jobs into good jobs. I get to focus on both the external side and the internal side of employee engagement. And so it's almost like a blank page. I get to kind of write what that looks like and listen to a lot of, individuals who have been with Legion for a long time or a short time and hear what they want and execute on those dreams.
That's awesome. I think it's really cool when you have like that flexibility and autonomy to kind of create that space and define your place and what you work in. So it sounds like that's what you've been able to do there at Allegiant, and it kind of sparks in me, or I saw an interesting stat really that was surprising to me, but then again wasn't so surprising. But I don't think it's at the top of most people's brain when they think of the workforce and the technology that we have available for like the workforce. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, this was in 2019, and I don't think it's changed so much from the 2020 version, but close to about 60% of jobs are hourly jobs, right? Yet when it comes to workplace technologies, you don't necessarily see like custom solutions or solutions tailored for, that workforce, right? If you have an HRIS system or an applicant tracking system, it's almost as if it's built for, like office work or, what some people would call, knowledge work in some cases, to the detriment of 60% of the workforce, right? So I don't know, like why do you think there's been a lag in innovation in hourly workforce technology?
It's such a good question. And that is like, everyone has to sit with that for a minute. Almost 60% of eligible working Americans are hourly. Yeah. So you think about how many people are actually eligible to work and what that population is. And we know that there are specific generations in there and that the majority of them are earning an income on an hourly level. And you think about how much they're earning. So, hourly workers tend to be some of the more vulnerable people in the population because of the income level for hourly workers typically. And on average, I think the hourly employee at a full-time basis earned like $52,000, I believe it was in 2021, which is really, really not a lot when you think about cost of living in the majority of places around the world, or specifically around the United States. But to answer your question about why, I think that it's easy for us, and this is really where my podcast comes in too, it's easy for us in salaried level positions to think about what makes sense for us and what makes sense for the business. And the business so often is a boardroom or a group of people who are making decisions that are being rolled down top to bottom. And it's not to say that someone isn't thinking about that hourly employee. I certainly don't think that that's true, but I think it's easy for us to, kind of forget who the end user is. And so for me, even thinking about my podcast, it's why it's called Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources, because we have to remember who our audience is as human resources professionals. And so when we think about Legion Technologies and what we're really focused on, we're specifically looking at that 60% of the population, those who are hourly. And we're saying we want to make those jobs good. We want to turn those hourly jobs into good jobs. So it's not to say that it's a problem easily solved. It obviously requires a lot of work and a lot of the fundamentals on the business side so that our customers have the foundation to implement our solutions. And so through automated scheduling, flexibility, a focus on predictability as well, those things really do drive what makes an hourly job a good job. And I know we'll get into that a little bit later too, but I do think that part of the reason why there isn't as much of a direct focus on the hourly is because those of us who are making the decisions are not hourly. So it's easy for us to forget the audience.
Yeah. And that's why I really loved your background and that you've come up from that. So you have that very firsthand frontline experience. And I think it really creates a lot of empathy and leaves a lot of room for innovation and understanding, one, your customers or your clients, right, externally, but then two, really, understanding really the challenges of managing that kind of workforce. And I think for some folks who may be out of that world, or maybe they're newly into that space, what are some of the challenges or common challenges when managing an hourly workforce that may be different if you may have a more broad salary-driven workforce? I'm curious to have your thoughts on that and share those with our folks who are tuned in.
Totally. I think some of the challenges are that, those hourly employees are just as driven by flexibility and predictability as we are. Mm-hmm. And in so many cases, hourly employees are not given that flexibility and that predictability in their schedules, unless, of course, they're a Legion customer. And then, subtle plug there.
Yes, all the plugs.
Yeah, right. The other thing is that, we always know, and we always hear this, that, there's incredible turnover, incredible attrition at the hourly level. And it's not just about pay. Right? Like pay is a part of it. We are, I already mentioned that the most vulnerable individuals are those typically earning an hourly wage because it can fluctuate. And so recognizing that pay is not the only challenge is part of solving the problem. And so I always talk about how, pay and benefits are obviously a piece of it, but we also know that those employees want to have this like self-determination over what and how they earn their income. And so Legion, some of our solutions include, of course, automated scheduling, which is based on employee preferences, and the business needs matching, which is an incredible functionality. But then also allowing a workforce sharing, functionality in the sense that if you have, one company with 2 stores nearby, employee X from one store could actually pick up a shift from that employee Y offered up because they can't work it anymore. So now they have an opportunity to actually increase their earnings and increase their income in a way that still provides the business support. So those are some things that I think when we think about what really impacts the hourly employee and what some of those challenges are, it's important to understand that. But also on the manager side, the actual optimization and operations behind that, like managing all of those schedule changes, managing those employee preferences and the business needs. It's a lot for one person or a couple managers in one location to manage. And so we, at Legion, we really take that burden and minimize it significantly. Actually, at SMCP, we saw over a 50% decrease in scheduling administrative tasks just in the first month of using Legion. So what would have taken 10 hours, like 7 to 10 hours on average, was then in 1 month taking 3 hours for a manager. And again, in a 1 month time frame, and in only the first month of using Legion. So now I'm sure that those metrics are even more improved.
Yeah, that's, amazing to hear how much, technology, when it's tailored for the workforce, for certain industries, for certain populations, can really make a difference, right? I've been a manager at, a retail site in my past days, and scheduling was by far, for me, the most terrifying, mind-sucking, draining thing I've ever had to do. And you just didn't like it, right? It got in the way of doing so many other things, but it was the key thing that drove so much, right? So I think it's really cool that, that's the feedback that you're getting from managers. It sounds like there's a really high ROI from them. What else are managers saying from your experience?
Oh my gosh. Well, we actually increased sales generation by 20% too, just in reinvesting that time spent. So what used to be 10 hours again in, month to month on scheduling administrative tasks, we were able to reinvest 7 of those hours because, again, in the first month of using Legion while I was at SMCP, we went from 10 hours on average to 3 hours on average in that 1 month of managing the schedule end to end, which is creation, editing, swapping shifts, approving those things, right? That's what we talk about when we say end to end. So those extra 7 hours that were put back into the manager's day actually went to training and developing the team, coaching the team, having meaningful conversations, and speaking with clients and customers to increase sales generation. So you think about, like, if a manager is listening to this podcast and they're like, man, I could totally use 7 hours back in my month. But, imagine what they spend those 7 hours on.
I think that's really, really powerful. And, the technology is there, like the data is there. Can we get it into the hands of frontline managers to be able to execute? I've seen so many technology platforms geared at, maybe like HR management and things like that, and say, well, if you have this, then you'll be able to do all these things. But it's like, no, you need to enable the people who are right there on the front lines to make the choices, to make their lives easier, not just HR's lives, easier for
yes, yes, 100%. And the way I always kind of allow this picture to be painted is that schedule ownership, meaning whether it's the end user or the manager, when they can own that piece of the pie, there's so much to take away from that. So you think about an hourly employee who maybe is working a couple jobs and they're being told by one employer that they have to have open availability, nights, weekends, holidays, and their second job is telling them the same thing. How do they balance that, right?
Well, it's not possible.
I mean, it's impossible, right? Because each employer is like, no, you have to prioritize me. And then there's always, or maybe there's an employee who's a student. How do you balance that? So when you think about the schedule ownership, when an employee, that end user, part-time employee, full-time employee can say, okay, I'm scheduled Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but actually I'd really prefer to work at this other job on Sunday. I'm going to open up this shift for someone else to take. That is one, it's so good for the business to allow the employee to really have that self-determination. But two, it's also much more operationally efficient because you have one individual managing their own schedules versus one manager managing all schedules. So you give them that ownership to have the self-determination, the flexibility, and the predictability. And then you have the manager really only managing the approval. So, Legion has this really awesome functionality where you can enable some parameters around swap shifts. So, maybe a sales associate could take another sales associate position, or I should say shift for that week. Just like a key holder could take a sales associate shift. So you have like some flexibility there. And then again, you're now through that ownership, you're driving the employees' connection to the business and what's going on because they feel more connected to their own lives. And I always talk about how people are whole employees. So, and whole people, they're not coming to work for their 9 to 5 and then checking everything else at the door. And then picking up that baggage or whatever they're leaving at the door for their 5 to 9 lives, they're bringing it all with them. So we have to be able to adapt and understand that people are themselves at work and outside of work. So we have to give them that flexibility. And again, coming back to this point about what our solutions enable. I mean, when you think about the manager and the amount of time they're spending on the schedule, when there's automated scheduling leveraging machine learning, it's actually taking all of that data that normally managers have to keep in their minds and in their brains. It's removing that. So you have this understanding of what your business does, but the machine learning creates this ideal schedule for you. And the beauty of machine learning is that it learns over time. Yeah. So that when you make changes, it learns from those changes. And so it just optimizes the full workforce.
Yeah. Workplace flexibility, I think over the last 2 years here, if we've learned anything, I think we've seen just how much that matters, right? Yeah. I mean, pay is, standard, but the flexibility to have some control, have some autonomy to feel like I can, fit my work into my life and not have to balance it too, right? I think the paradigm versus like balance, how much of my work, how much of my life, but it's like, no, like it's integrated. And I love that concept of like, this is the same whole person that shows up at each and every one of those moments. So.
Yeah, like I didn't when I was working at Aeropostale, I didn't like go from Aeropostale Tracy to like home Tracy. I was the same Tracy.
Right. Same Tracy.
Yeah, same Tracy. I think. As far as I'm concerned, I was the same Tracy. And we have a study that really furthers this point. So we surveyed 1,000 managers and employees back in 2021, and we asked them, what their reasons for leaving a job would be. And aside from pay, because pay definitely has an influence, but aside from pay, 59% of those 1,000 employees said that schedule empowerment, one way or another, would be the reason why they quit. So whether it's lack of flexibility, a lack of predictability, a lack of being able to own their schedules, a lack of being able to swap shifts or pick up shifts as they need, that 59% said that scheduling empowerment would be the reason that they leave after pay.
Wow. So what's funny, and I'm not, correlation doesn't equal causation here, but when you look at the average estimates of turnover year over year in hourly jobs, It's around 59, 60%.
I mean, yeah. There's nothing more to say. Right? Yeah, a little suspicious, isn't it?
Yeah. But I think that's such a great point, but just like how much it matters, right? So, I think that leads to another thought here, right? If I'm a business and I'm like, you know what, I want to have a more flexible workforce, to give my people this autonomy, but I obviously have big business needs, right? For businesses with a sizable hourly employee base, how can they offer greater flexibility while still meeting the scheduling demands of the business? Because I think that's the scary thing, because it's a huge shift from I control to my employees control. I don't know what they're going to do.
It is a little scary. Like you kind of feel like you have to buckle up, right?
Yeah.
But if there's anything that we've learned since the pandemic, it's that the employee is sitting in the driver's seat. And until businesses acknowledge that and then also listen to that, you're just going to constantly be chasing this solution, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, it's easy for me to say, well, you need Legion in order to solve that problem, but you kind of do. The key here is that you need the foundation of listening to your employees' needs and concerns. And that's always first and foremost. Doesn't matter what kind of innovation or technology you have, if you don't have that culture of, really consideration and compassion for your, workforce, then no matter how much you invest into technology, it's probably not going to work. So you have to have that foundation, that cultural foundation. Second, I really think that AI-powered workforce management solves this challenge. So to give you a specific anecdote, when I was at SMCP, we had 100% adoption of the Legion mobile app, which means that 100% of employees, which by the way, retail employees are not the first ones to appreciate change.
Yeah.
They're going to question everything. They're going to ask why the thing that wasn't broken, right? But the reality is that 100% of employees downloaded the app and used it. So now you have the attention of your workforce. And when you integrate, for example, we have Frontline communications, which allows this either one-to-one communication between like the manager or the company and the employee, or just direct. Like you can set up parameters where maybe your employees don't interact on the communication. But you think about this hourly workforce: 60% of Americans are hourly employees, and they often also give feedback that they don't really feel connected to the company and to the overarching mission, goals, values. And I saw this throughout my retail career, not just at Target, not just at SMCP. It was a pervasive challenge to connect that major workforce. Like you said, companies that have, huge populations of employees. And one of the ways that you do that is through communication on top of all of those scheduling parameters. So, that I think that communication is a huge culture driver. And it's something that our solution really allows to improve upon, to create that culture and that two-way connection. But then coming back to the actual change management and how you empower your hourly workforce while also meeting the business demands, you set up parameters, right? Like there are certain things that you can do as far as demand drivers go within our solution that allows businesses to say, okay, well, we want employees to be able to workforce share and pick up shifts, but we also want to make sure that they're balancing, work and their personal life and not taking on too many shifts. So maybe you don't allow overtime every single week, for example, so that you are making sure that they're, not burning out, but also able to take on as many shifts as possible. Yeah. In my personal experience with SMCP, we had, a significant employee population, and the majority of our employees, of course, were hourly. The statistics make sense here, considering 60% of U.S. employees are hourly. And so they were, in managing that, one of the biggest things about what Legion is that it's a scalable solution. We're a scalable company. So we have customers that have over 10,000 employees, and then we have customers that have under 1,000 employees, under 500. And so it's the machine learning, it's our focus and attention on the details in our solutions that allow, the scalability. And so what I would say to any business listening to this, maybe a little bit fearful about giving that empowerment, just remember, you're either going to give schedule empowerment and work toward retaining your teams, or you're going to be chasing a different solution when we already polled those 1,000 employees and managers, and already 59% said that they're going to leave regardless if they're not getting schedule empowerment. So you might as well focus on what the true solution is to at least work toward it, rather than, again, trying to, run and catch up to it.
Yeah, that's some awesome insight there. That, look, people are looking for this anyway. So if you don't offer it, then you're going to be looking for people, because people will be looking elsewhere for this as well,
Exactly. And actually at SMCP, this is the perfect point, Vic. Like at SMCP, we actually used it as a recruitment tool. Like, hey, you might not get this type of flexibility and schedule empowerment at other companies, but guess where you will get it. And this is something that, in my role, again, I get this really amazing opportunity to focus on our internal employees, but I also get to help existing customers to focus on employee engagement within their teams. And so it's something that I always talk about, like, use this to attract talent, but also don't forget that it's a retention tool. You want to really be celebrating this ability to be flexible and provide flexibility on top of the predictability for your hourly workforce. You want to celebrate that in workforce sharing, that one, you should set it up, and two, when you give an employee the ability to work their own shift, like, here's a perfect frame of reference.
Okay.
Think about, a retail store that maybe is lower volume. You have maybe, or hospitality, maybe it's like smaller, it's in a remote location. Maybe you have 4 to 10 employees.
Right.
Whatever you schedule them, you're giving them the max, because unless you all of a sudden increase your revenue a lot, your labor costs are the most costly part of a business, right? So you're giving them the max that you can. But maybe 10 miles down the road, you have a high volume location and you have maybe 100, 200 employees. In Target, when I worked at Target, the volumes were so incredible. You could have super high volume, super low volume. Right. And so now you have maybe more hours, but there's also more of a demand to make sure that those hours are filled for the high volume and filled for the low volume, because it could mean either not accomplishing goals or potentially even closing a store for a day if it's super low volume and you have someone call out. So when you have workforce sharing, you actually just in general are sharing the workforce across the stores. So now you're optimizing labor costs. So on the business side, you're lowering costs on average, lowering those costs. And then on the employee side, you're giving them the flexibility to actually work more. So that low volume, low format store that has 4 to 10 employees or, 100 employees, depending on what low volume is for a company, if they're only able to be scheduled 20 hours a week, but now there are 10 hours up for grabs at the store down the road, you're allowing them 30 hours in that week versus 20. And for some people, that's a few $100s. I mean, that's major for someone earning on an hourly basis.
Yeah, no, that's so powerful. I think that this mindset of, if you work at this store, then this is the store that you work at was convenient, because I don't think there's been a way to systematize or, create that opportunity. And if so, a human being would have to manage that back and forth about doing this. And as you can tell, if you're like me, you hate scheduling. So that's not the first job you're like, I'm going to get up and do this. But by allowing your employees to kind of take that ownership of their schedule, they signed up for it. They know they will, the research shows that when we have more ownership, we're more likely to be more effective at those things and what we do. So that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah. And I mean, you think about coming back to that question of how businesses, kind of reconcile this reality that now the employee is in the driver's seat. Giving them the driver's seat actually enables you to optimize your costs, like just in workforce sharing as an example. But also we know that happy employees are productive employees. So you're gonna be driving your bottom line anyway. Don't be afraid of it. Just lean in. I love it. Wow. I think, just go in a tangent here, but when you were talking about communication, right? Corporate communication seems pretty standard for your average office, knowledge worker job. You almost live in email. Mm-hmm. So corporate communication is readily accessible. However, I know firsthand for a lot of hourly jobs and hourly roles, some
employees don't even have company email. And if they do, they only check it to check their pay, right?
Yeah.
So what does, and so I think it questioned me of, a lot of the ways that companies may try to show corporate values or just try to, instill company culture is through their communications, but they don't have these channels. But it sounds like those may open up if you do have a system or platform like this. But I guess in essence, can you talk to me more about, corporate communication and corporate values and how that plays a role in offering flexibility technology to enable that?
Totally. I mean, I think you and I even first spoke about this when we first met, that how did we get communication when we were working our retail jobs? We really didn't, or we looked at the bulletin board if we were, interested, or maybe there wasn't anything else going on that day.
Right.
And we happened to check the board in the break room, right? But like, how, as a manager, do you ensure that everyone sees that communication? Unless you speak with each employee, you have absolutely no clue. And even then, you don't actually know if they've received that communication. So, businesses rely on huddles and chat-ins and things like that, of course, to get the communication out there. But what about the employees that is scheduled off for that day? How are they being chatted in? How are they getting that communication? And I'm sure everyone listening can think back to a time where they ran a survey or responded to a survey where they said, I need more communication. I'm not getting enough communication. And you probably have access to email or Slack, chats, Teams, and all of those things as a salaried or knowledge-based worker, right? So when you think about, again, 60% of the US workforce being hourly, the majority of that 60%, I would probably even go to say like 58% of that 60% probably, meaning like 58 of the 60, or maybe 99%, let's say we'll break it down in a more realistic number. 99% of that 60 is probably not going to have access to communication tools. So to your point, they're likely not having email. I know in all of my retail experience, with the exception of SMCP, employees did not have email access, for example, and they didn't actually have any communication tool. And so for us at Legion, having this frontline communication solution allows us to focus on driving culture through communication. And so when we think about, what we do and how we turn hourly jobs into good jobs, it's through all of those things, machine learning, AI, and all that, but it's also through driving culture. And driving culture is so reliant on communication. And so when I think about that hourly workforce and how they're getting information about anything at the corporate level or top down, it's usually a bad game of telephone, meaning like you're hearing it from like, the employee that worked yesterday, and they might not have been, the perfect person to, deliver this next message.
Not the best messenger, right?
Yeah, like you're not going to shoot the messenger, but at the same time, we all know what a bad game of telephone looks like. You start with the word banana and then you end with email. And there is so much lost in translation, right? But through frontline communications, what we do is we allow businesses to set parameters. So again, maybe your culture today is not as, two-way. And so you're not ready yet to give your employees a platform to just post whatever they want or talk about whatever they want. And so maybe you start out with the parameter where it's just, manager or company to employee. And so now you have employees who, again, at SMCP, 100% adoption of the mobile app, have the app on their phones. And you can also set parameters around making sure they're only getting communication when they're at work, thanks to our geofencing technology. But, then you have an employee get to work and they see all of the frontline communication that's come in since they last worked. So now they're automatically caught up into what the values or the mission or the demand of that day or that week or that month or that year look like. And so they feel more connected to the bigger picture. They feel more connected to the people around them and to the company. And, so many like platforms in terms of like workplaces where this 60% of the workforce is not necessarily directly connected to a corporate entity. Like when I think about all of my retail experience, I worked in a specific store. So how do I feel connected to what the company's mission is? How do I feel connected to what the focus is for that month, or what the objectives are for that year? I mean, you don't unless you have that really intentional communication focus.
Yeah. I think you said it best, where that communication is a driver of culture. And if there isn't a communication channel, then you can probably be sure that there is culture challenges, like within that, or the culture or the values that the company would like to share, enforce, drive, won't be passed down because the channels just aren't there, right?
Yeah, exactly. And culture is a really hard thing to cultivate, but it's much more difficult to actually maintain it. Every single person influences the culture of an environment, of a company. It's not just HR, it's not just the manager, it's not just one employee. And that's why when someone is really not bought into the culture, it can just completely degrade what's already been created. So when you at least invest in things that are designed to cultivate culture and designed to maintain and improve culture, then at least, again, you're problem solving. You're not just saying, oh, well, we have a cultural issue and we have to figure out where it's coming from. You're at least saying, okay, well, we know that communication is part of it. So let's just make sure that we're communicating directly to the end user versus having this, antiquated bulletin board or communication board that people are not reading anyway.
Yes. I don't remember any of my bulletin board says. No. I think I walked past it and maybe glanced up if I'm working, and then just kept on going.
Totally. The only time anyone in my retail experience ever read a bulletin board was when it said free pizza on Friday.
The pizza, of course. Of course. No. And you mentioned something earlier around, geolocation and geofencing that I think is really important because, as technology becomes so pervasive and you're asking people to download a means of communicating with them, one could say, well, this is encroaching now into my off work time, off work hours. Tell us about the ability to mainly share let's say company specific messages within a certain context or location, because I think that helps with that whole a balance, your time versus company time conversation that always comes up.
Totally. And actually, it's really important to be compliant on this. Listen, I come from a traditional HR background with like a super focus on compliance. And, I'm the first to say that you have to make sure that you are not discussing work outside of the working hours time. And that's just first and foremost. So when through our Frontline communication solution, we actually enable the geofencing so that companies who decide they are going to have more work-related conversations, not just, announcements that are, important for their employment versus like work conversations, you set up the geofencing so that when someone is not at work, they're not able to check this communication. They obviously have access to scheduling because scheduling is an employment functionality and framework. It's not necessarily work conversation. So I can easily, as an HR person, I can easily talk to someone about their schedule, whether they're at work or not, but I can't necessarily talk to them about what's going on at work, what's work related. So there is that ability to separate and allow the person to have that continued connection to their schedule, picking up shifts, workforce sharing, whatever that looks like, but then also only have communication access when they are at work and actually physically clocked in and in their location. So there is, there's a super focus on and importance on the compliance piece there. And I think speaking as a former customer, Legion does a really nice job of making the manager aware of compliance, necessities, which is really good because sometimes you have to remember that. Like you have to remember when a meal is supposed to be scheduled. You have to remember when there's supposed to be a break. Some provinces in Canada or some states in the United States are really, really specific about this and hyper litigious. So we kind of take that guesswork out of it, which is great. And again, as a former user on the external side, I can say that it works really well. And I think one of the things that is really important for our customers too is to know that part of employee engagement is recognizing that there is a work-life balance. And so that's why, the scheduling piece is so important, to be able to have workforce sharing and to be able to own, swap shifts and things like that. But then also keeping them connected to the communication, but on the time that makes sense based on when they are at work.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm glad that there's that balance there too, and that thought is there too, because I think many of us, especially over the last 2 years, can feel the encroachment of work into times where we may have, had clear separations of this is, like when I'm in work mode versus this is, when I'm, a wife, husband mode or family mode, right? So with that, the blurring of those lines, helping to at least create that separation for folks, is glad to hear that. Yeah. So, wow, we've talked about a lot. Let's see. There's probably just one other thing I wanted to poke your brain about, and that's really around on-demand pay, instant pay. It's been growing in popularity, but it's one of the, I think, significant innovations that's actually come from the hourly workforce model, versus, a salary workforce model. What has been the reception of adopting this model, or this, really it's a benefit, right? And what are apprehensions or obstacles some may have for implementing it? I'm not sure how much experience you've had with talking with people like that or implementing an on-demand pay feature, but it's been growing in popularity. So love to hear your thoughts about it.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad that you're bringing this up, because I'm a big fan of the instant pay and pay when you need it, mostly because I know what it's like to kind of live that paycheck to paycheck life. And it's tough. Like if you have a bill due and you're not getting paid for another 2 weeks, like you're stressed. And that stress, I'm sure at some level, regardless of your background, like everyone can relate to the financial pressures of life. And when you just intrinsically, when you give people this gig-like flexibility to earn their income when they need it, not just, when they have to have it, but when they need it, you are really driving engagement. You're driving retention. And, to kind of set the stage again, let's keep in mind 60% of eligible working Americans earn an hourly income. In 2021, the average annual income was $52,000. So if we assume that that's a full-time hourly employee, part-timers are working half that, probably. And so now, again, they're picking up multiple jobs and, they're trying to make ends meet. But when we think about coming back to this workforce sharing, when you have our instant pay solution enabled for the population, for example, you're actually able to see, and in general, I should say this, regardless of the instant pay solution, when the time and attendance solution is integrated within an organization, an employee actually sees how much they're going to earn from that shift. And there's something really interesting about that, because I can think, right? Like I can think about a time when, I was taking my AP classes in high school and I knew I had a shift on Saturday, but I was tired. But if I could see that I was going to earn, let's say $50 in that 4, 5, 6 hour shift. Let's see, if I made $750, we could do the math, right? Then, maybe I'm probably going to show up for that shift if I know that exactly how much it's going to earn me, right? So then when you take that impression that you're implementing on the workforce, that every shift is actually money in their pocket, because it's very easy to dissociate that, especially if you're tired, especially if, you work multiple jobs, but you see how much you're able to earn. Then you give the employees actually the opportunity to cash that out. I mean, you're saying, hey, I understand that, you're working this job for a reason, and you probably need some flexibility, and you might want some flexibility in how you're earning your income. And so instant pay, again, it's a benefit. It's definitely not a necessity. But when you think about the trend in the hourly workforce today, that flexibility and predictability that we've been talking about this whole time, that is like a very gig work-like mentality to give people the flexibility of working when they want to work and earning the income as they want to earn it. So now when you take that perspective and you recognize that employees, these whole human beings, have lives outside of work, then you match that with the ability to cash out their earnings, their, the money that they've earned to date. You're giving them a whole lot of control over their lives. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And then to answer your question about some challenges maybe, or things that would maybe degrade this opportunity or make it challenging, I think it's just a matter of having the operational foundation. And, businesses might not be set up today through their payroll function or their HRIS system to enable this right away. But I can tell you from my experience at SMCP that it's something really, really awesome, and something that even we really were working to operationalize. And so it's not going to be something super easy initially, because of course, you have to think about how are you going to communicate? What's the change management like? How do you manage this on a payroll side? But it's doable. And we see from our customers who use Instant Pay that there are incredible anecdotes to employee engagement as a result. And when employees realize how much control they have over their schedule, over their income, over their daily lives, they want to work for you. And you're doing something that has a competitive advantage that many employers today don't have Instant Pay. And so when you have that competitive advantage of not only Instant Pay but the labor efficiency and the automated scheduling, so you're enabling this flexibility and predictability for your end user, you're engaging your managers, you're making their jobs easier, less burdensome, right? Like you're giving them something that is really truly a return on your investment. And then you're taking the hourly workforce, which so seldom is the priority in some of these decisions. And you're saying, hey, you're our priority. We want to make sure that we're giving you things that make your life easier, regardless of where you work or what you do. We are making your life easier. We're allowing you to pay your bills more easily and to earn more. I mean, that's like, I could talk about this for hours because I'm truly so passionate about what it is that we have the potential to do. And so we see with our customers that use Instant Pay, we really see this drive with employee engagement and experience. And again, that competitive advantage that we all want to have, right?
Yeah. I think it speaks volumes that, so a few things that you talked about that I just have to emphasize, right? I can think of myself, back when I was, like selling shoes at the shoe store that I worked at, and not feeling like I want to come in because, if your pay is 2 weeks away, there's such a dissociation with the work that you're going to do, with the income that you're going to earn. So even just viewing your schedule that day as, I can make $60. I need $60. I got a phone bill. Let's do this, right?
Totally.
I think that's awesome. Just in and of itself,
Yeah. And we at SMCP, we definitely saw a huge improvement on the number of shifts that were missed or like no call, no shows. And it's, we were, again, we integrated Legion in 2020 and you think about what that means, right? We all lived through the pandemic, right? I mean, it was a little tough. We leveraged Legion actually to decide when we closed our doors, when we were only able to staff for 5 days a week. So we had, and I know you're the analytics guy, like we're going to talk about this, I'm sure, but like we were able to use the forecasting that Legion's machine learning does to, it integrates all this data and it figures out for us what our peak traffic days, peak sale days, hours by hour. We were able to actually use that data that Legion aggregated for us and say, oh, wow, actually Monday is not our slowest day. So we should close on this day and that day. And so it actually just in general was able to, maximize our efficiency at the business level, but also give employees that, again, that like predictability and the confidence knowing that we're making decisions that were really best for them. Because when you're open on a day that's not so busy versus being open on being closed on a day that isn't busy, that is busy, like you're directly impacting the income of a commission eligible employee, which our employees were. So, Legion, like end to end, impacting the manager, impacting the business, and then also being able to increase, just intrinsically the income for hourly employees. It's an amazing thing. And, thinking again about this, being able to see how much you earn, when we rolled out Legion and employees were able to really have this control and empowerment over their schedules, we saw just an improvement in experience and happiness because of all of those things. And again, just to reiterate what you reiterated, which is that, you can see how much you can earn, and why would you want to miss out on $60? That's like really good for the employee, but it's also really good for the business. So again, lean in. If you're a business thinking about ways in which you can drive employee engagement and you're just like racking your brain, want to maintain and retain your team. I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of going back to the basics and remembering that employees are human beings, they're people.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. I think, this probably gets to the heart of your podcast, right? You're putting the human back in human resources, but understanding that, these people are here for a reason, give them control, lean in. It strikes me really interesting that all these things that seem maybe a bit maybe scary or imposing for businesses now are probably a lot of the same businesses that are suffering the most in this season of the great resignation, right? And we talk about competitive advantages when it comes to, positioning, strategy, and marketplace products. But I think the last few years have showed us if there's any competitive advantage is having the people and having the best people and people who want to be there. So I think this is a great way to create that competitive advantage.
Totally.
Offering flexibility, caring for people, giving people the autonomy to kind of cash out, just changing that perspective of like your success is company's success, which it can be, but sometimes it's hard to really balance that,
Yeah, totally. You said it best.
Awesome. Well, we have talked about a lot. This is a longer show than usual, but I'm sure the folks tuned in are enjoying it a lot. Let's actually dive into some concluding thoughts here, but I'm so grateful for this conversation, Tracy. It has been tremendous. If I were to offer you a billboard to put a message or a takeaway from today, what would you have on that billboard? We've talked about a lot here, or maybe something that we haven't talked about, which would be surprising, but I'm sure there's lots of things that we haven't talked about today. But what would you put on that billboard?
I'm tempted to say, remember your audience. Because I feel like we've talked a lot about like why certain decisions are made, or, why the hourly workforce being the majority is like so seldom remembered in some of these decisions. And I feel like, it's remember your audience. And also to caveat that, maybe it's like a little asterisk and then it's like written in really small print on the billboard.
Okay.
People are human beings. So like when you're executing something like this, like bring people in. Part of the change management is like recognizing who the stakeholders are, getting their input, getting their buy-in, and really, listening to the things that they feel would improve their experience. And then, remember your audience. Your audience is, 60% of Americans being hourly employees. That's major.
Yeah, that is. And I think that's very apropos based on our conversation of that going on a billboard. I mean, again, for those folks who are looking for ways to try to attract, try to retain, and if you do have a sizable hourly workforce, I think that just goes like without saying. And then, just tips from you here, Tracy. I'm always curious to see what people are learning more about, or maybe it's something that you're looking forward to. So what is something you're actively learning or perhaps looking forward to here?
I'm actively learning more and more about our solutions internally, which I love because, of course, I had the external experience as a customer, the project manager, et cetera. But being able to see like what's on the horizon, all the exciting things that we're doing, and what is just, really a passion for everyone, which is our mission to turn hourly jobs into good jobs. I'm learning that every day. It's so nice that for me, my passion, obviously we spoke for so long about this because it's such an exciting topic, I think, for me and for you. But seeing and witnessing the excitement of every single person on the Legion side about our mission and why we're doing what we're doing, like that's awesome. And it's really such a privilege to work for a company like this. Yeah.
Cool.
I'll end it there.
No, awesome. And as the Director of Employee Engagement, I'm sure that lots come your way. I think I can already tell, but you have to keep it all organized. You have to be productive. What's your favorite productivity hack, tool, tip that really helps you get things done?
I would say I never leave something that can be done quickly for later. Like I definitely, everyone procrastinates. I'm sure I've procrastinated, probably even today, but I would say I'm really not. And that's because, I really believe that something that can be done now is going to be best done now. And if you just don't have the energy for it now, then plan it for later rather than just saving it for later. Really think intentionally about how you're putting it to another day. And so I block out all of my time literally for everything, even if it's a walk or lunch or something like that, just because that is the way for me to really make sure I'm getting everything done that I want to get done.
Yeah, same here. I cannot live without my calendar. Even have to schedule a few like personal things. Like you shouldn't have to schedule to go to the bathroom. But if you're in meetings all day, you kind of need a window.
Bathroom break. Yeah.
Your bio break, please.
Totally.
Oh man. Okay. Very, very cool. Well, as we wrap things up here, Tracy, what's the best piece of career advice that you feel you were ever given, or something that you hold on to that you feel like is good to share with our audience here today?
So I'll share the feedback that I've gotten and the feedback that I give.
Okay.
The feedback that I've got, the feedback that I've gotten is that people will give you feedback and it's up to you to decide whether you keep it or not. It's arguably the best career advice I've ever gotten because I care a lot about what people think and I want people, most people won't admit that, but like I'm very direct. Like I really want people to have a good impression.
Please like me.
Please like me. Like I'm a yes person. I'm a people person. Like I want people to walk away saying like, hey, I like her and she's authentic and she's genuine. And so I work really hard to be exactly who I am. So that sometimes people don't always have your best interest in mind. And you're going to get feedback that might represent that. So just pick which bucket you're putting it into, the keep or the trash, right? And you should always appreciate any feedback that you're getting, because I really do believe that feedback is a gift. But the advice I should say that I always give is that every problem has a solution. And we've talked a lot about problems today. We've talked a lot about solutions. And just keep in mind that if you have a problem, whether it's personal, professional, there is always a solution to attribute to it.
Beautiful. I love those two, especially that first one. Feedback is golden, but you decide if you keep it, if you toss it. Just makes things just flow over easier. You don't have to let things sit with you.
Yes.
You just take it and just put it over here.
Yeah. Keep.
Right, exactly. Well, Tracy, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for the amazing conversations and the awesome work that you all are doing at Legion Technology. If you would like to learn more about Legion Technology and Tracy, we'll leave an info card here at the end. But Tracy, this has been a blast as expected. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much. You're a pleasure to speak with, and I always have so much fun talking to you. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. All right, folks, until the next one. See you.